How does a rookie drafted in the 5th round, a player 143 names deep into the draft, manage to spark lawsuits, enrage billion-dollar owners, and potentially rewrite the entire business structure of professional sports? That's the question Shedeur Sanders forced the NFL to ask itself the moment he signed his contract. And his deal wasn't just unusual, it was revolutionary. On paper, it looked like routine business. Sanders was selected 144th overall by the Cleveland Browns. He inked the standard 4-year rookie deal worth about $4.65 million. A modest sum compared to the $40+ million packages handed to first-rounders like Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. A signing bonus of $447,000. Base salaries starting at $840,000. Nothing here screamed chaos. Nothing here suggested history in the making. Until people spotted one line buried in the fine print: the prime equity clause. That quiet clause detonated like dynamite. For the first time in NFL history, a rookie wasn't just being paid as an employee, he was being cut in as a business partner. The clause guaranteed Sanders a percentage of revenue tied directly to his name, his image, and his likeness. Jersey sales? He got a piece. Sponsorship activations tied to his brand? He got a piece. Digital campaigns, slogans, or merchandise linked to him? He got a piece. The percentage never hit the public record, but insiders whisper 5 to 6%. On a massive scale, that's revolutionary. And the impact was immediate. Within months, Sanders' rookie jersey sales generated a staggering $250 million. His cut? About $14 million in commission. That already dwarfed his entire 4-year base salary. Think about that. In year 1, before throwing a single touchdown in a regular season, Sanders had out-earned most veteran quarterbacks who'd been in the league for years. A 5th rounder became one of the NFL's top-paid rookies overnight. That's why people inside the league aren't calling this just a contract. They're calling it a challenge to the system. Because the NFL has always operated like a fortress. Rookie contracts are slotted and locked by the collective bargaining agreement. Owners like control, franchises like predictability. The system is designed to cap rookie power while owners reap the revenue from jerseys, streams, and marketing. Shedeur and his team, led by his father, Dion, the savvy NFL Hall of Famer who knows the business inside and out, flipped that script. Instead of being a silent partner in the machine, Sanders demanded a cut of the machine's gears. And this wasn't just about money. His deal included full ownership of his personal media platforms. Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, all uncensored and controlled entirely by Shedeur. Even more radical, his brother, Deion Sanders Jr., was granted rights to produce behind-the-scenes content inside NFL spaces, access that normally requires Roger Goodell's signature to avoid copyright crackdowns, which, by the way, Goodell himself personally approved. Imagine that! A rookie quarterback with his own in-house media team allowed to profit from footage no other player could touch. The league hated it, owners in particular, because this wasn't a one-off clause. This was a precedent. If Sanders could pull this off as a 5th rounder, what happens when the next consensus top 5 pick demands the same? What happens when a global icon like Arch Manning or Caleb Williams looks across the table and says, "I want equity too"? Suddenly, rookie contracts aren't fixed costs anymore. They're open negotiations that cut owners out of revenue streams they've hogged for decades. And that's where the storm began. Lawsuits started raining down. Media narratives split between admiration for Sanders and outrage that he was arrogant enough to demand equity before ever starting a snap. Even more explosive? Rumors surfaced that multiple NFL teams intentionally colluded against him during the draft to teach him a lesson. Hall of Famers like Eric Dickerson said they heard from insiders that owners coordinated to push Shedeur into the later rounds, punishing him for cheating the process like recruitment instead of obedience. By the time the Browns rescued him at pick 144, he had already lost about $44 million in traditional contract value compared to his projected top 10 slot. But here's the irony. That draft day disaster may have been the best thing that ever happened to him, because falling far enough gave the Browns incentive to accommodate his demands. And accommodating them gave him the stage to become the most disruptive rookie in league history. It's a script no screenwriter would risk because it sounds too implausible. A rookie sliding out of the first round, punished for confidence, only to end up with a deal so innovative it out-earns the very players taken ahead of him. Yet here we are. The lawsuit drama is real. The owner's fury is real. The fan fascination is real, and the question hangs heavier by the day. Is Shedeur Sanders just a quarterback with promise, or the player who is about to break the NFL's business model forever? Every NFL rookie signs some version of the same thing, a slotted contract, predetermined down to the last penny. It's one of the league's greatest control mechanisms. Rookie pay is tied to draft position, and negotiation power is essentially non-existent. That system was designed to stop young players from walking in with demands, demanding cash before proving themselves, and supposedly ruining rosters. But Shedeur Sanders just blew that system wide open with 4 words: the prime equity clause. For the first time in league history, a drafted rookie didn't just sign to play football. He signed on as a business partner. Instead of merely collecting a set salary, Sanders locked in a percentage of every single dollar the Browns generate from his name, image, and likeness. Jerseys, hoodies, highlight reels rebranded for Browns social media, promotional campaigns, slogans, even custom merch. If it's Sanders related, he gets a cut. It sounds small at first, 5 to 6% according to insiders. Who gets worked up over 6%, right? But scale it out. Rookie jersey sales for Shedeur Sanders reportedly hit an insane $250 million. His slice of that pie alone? Roughly $14 million, almost triple his entire rookie signing bonus before he even threw a regular season pass. That commission eclipsed not just his base $840,000 salary for 2025, but the entire 4-year value of his rookie contract. By September, Sanders had out-earned most tenured quarterbacks signed for years. And here's the genius of it. It doesn't touch the salary cap. This wasn't structured as a bonus or as standard compensation. It was written up as a revenue-sharing arrangement, treated as business income instead of player salary. That makes it cap-compliant under the current collective bargaining agreement, and that's why owners are terrified. The system wasn't built to stop something like this. Sanders basically found a cheat code hiding inside the financial playbook and hit the buttons before anyone else thought to try. It's not just money either. The equity clause means Sanders has created a feedback loop. The better his personal brand does, the more he earns. And the more he earns, the more the Browns benefit, because his brand drives merchandise sales they'd never see from a typical 5th-round pick. He stops being a financial risk and becomes a walking profit center. And this is exactly why the clause is so terrifying to the old guard. Imagine if every star rookie quarterback demanded this moving forward. Imagine Trevor Lawrence with equity. Imagine Joe Burrow signing his first deal and asking for 8% of jersey sales. Imagine a generational talent like Caleb Williams tying his brand directly to the Bears' revenue machine. Point. The numbers get astronomical very fast, and suddenly, billion-dollar owners start losing the absolute control that's defined the NFL's labor system for decades. Sanders' camp knew exactly what they were doing. His deal even extends to digital media rights, meaning his likeness across the Browns' clips, captions, hype videos, and even YouTube highlights isn't fully controlled by the team. If it's tied to his image, there's a revenue-sharing trigger in play. Compare that to almost every other NFL player where the brand is controlled entirely by the team until they leave. Shedeur just flipped that hierarchy at 22 years old. The clause already has ripple effects. Agents across the league are studying it like a scavenger map, plotting how to demand similar structures for their next wave of clients. The NFLPA, caught somewhere between awe and dread, is tracking how this affects future negotiations. And owners? They hate it. Not just because Sanders is making millions, but because he proved you don't need to be the #1 pick to pull it off. He was drafted in the 5th round. If a mid-rounder can break the mold, what stops the next superstar from blowing the doors wide open? That's why this clause is now the most feared line in sports contracts. It shattered the illusion that rookie players have no leverage. It proved brand power can be just as valuable or more valuable than draft slot. And maybe most importantly, it proved that a rookie doesn't need to be quietly grateful for whatever scraps he's given. For Sanders, the prime equity clause wasn't just about money, it was about control. Control of his brand, control of his narrative, control of how he participates in the business he generates, and that's what owners fear most, the loss of total control. But as controversial as that clause is, it's only the opening play. Because beyond the dollars and the percentages, Sanders also did something even more dangerous. He took complete ownership of his media voice, and that, more than anything, threatens to unravel the NFL's iron grip on its players' stories. If the prime equity clause cracked the NFL's financial armor, then the media rights piece of Shedeur Sanders' contract drove a spear straight through the heart of its cultural control. Because money matters to owners, yes, but nothing terrifies the league more than losing its monopoly over the story. And for the first time, a rookie isn't just playing in the league's story. He's writing his own. Here's what Sanders negotiated: complete ownership of his personal media platforms. Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, all of it controlled fully by him, not by the Cleveland Browns or the league office. That might sound small in an era where every athlete posts selfies and highlight reels, but trust this: NFL contracts usually give teams a shocking amount of oversight over what players post. The league is obsessed with protecting the shield, and that means editing, restricting, and sometimes outright censoring player content that doesn't fit the brand. Sanders flipped that script. His deal makes his digital platforms off-limits to NFL hands. He can vlog practices, he can live stream workouts, he can monetize his Twitch streams during the off-season, and he doesn't have to beg for approval to do it. That clause alone is a nuclear detonation in a league that's prided itself on tightly controlled messaging. But Shedeur didn't stop there. The contract embeds Deion Sanders Jr., his brother, as a full-fledged behind-the-scenes documentarian, with special access to shoot, edit, and monetize content that would normally be seized or deleted by NFL copyright lawyers. Jr. is now essentially carrying a golden press badge, authorized to capture training camp antics, locker room interactions, and in-game perspectives that usually vanish behind the league's paywall. That clause required direct approval from Roger Goodell himself. Let that sink in. NFL insiders say the commissioner was reluctant, but ultimately allowed it, probably recognizing that denying Deion's son could trigger its own PR firestorm. With that approval, Sanders Jr. became the only private content creator embedded within the NFL machine. For Cleveland, that means every camera pointed at Shedeur isn't the league's camera. It's his family's camera. Why does this matter? Because controlling the narrative is power. Normally, if a player struggles in camp or has an ugly moment in preseason, the team controls how that footage surfaces. Maybe they scrub it. Maybe they leak just enough to fit a preferred narrative. Rookie, learning the ropes. But with this media clause, Sanders' camp controls counter footage. They can spin context, reframe the story, and put their own perspective out instantly. If critics in the press call him arrogant or unprepared, his YouTube team can upload behind-the-scenes vlogs showing dedication, late-night film sessions, or coach-player dynamics that tell another story. That alone is terrifying for executives. The NFL has always preferred one-way storytelling. The league speaks, the players nod. Now, for the first time, a rookie quarterback has the loudest mic in the room, and it doesn't plug into the league's soundboard. It also represents major leverage in branding. Social media is where fan bases are built now. Shedeur already walked into the NFL with millions of Instagram followers and a digital-savvy college-era audience. Add in content that feels more authentic, unscripted, and personal than the NFL's glossy promos, and suddenly, the fans aren't flocking to official team accounts. They're following him directly. That's bad news for owners who rely on controlling media eyeballs as part of their sponsorship packages. And, much like the prime equity clause, this won't stop with Sanders. Agents are already circling, studying. If a fifth-round rookie snagged this kind of media carve-out, what will first-round juggernauts demand in 2026? Image rights, docuseries partnerships, dual contracts with YouTube or Amazon. The possibilities are endless once the precedent exists. For years, leagues across the world feared athletes bypassing the traditional media pipes. Cristiano Ronaldo made Real Madrid shake when his image rights eclipsed the club's. LeBron James created The Decision and essentially owned ESPN airtime. But Sanders? He's the first NFL rookie to legally own his digital narrative inside the structure of his contract. That's not improvisation, that's pioneering, and it gets even bigger. Because with this clause, Sanders doesn't just protect himself from negative press, he potentially profits directly from NFL footage. Clips of him in actual Browns games, behind-the-scenes moments that normally vanish into NFL archive vaults, can be repurposed by his family media arm into monetizable content. Highlights that usually fatten NFL Films' library are now dual-stream, feeding Sanders' personal brand too. It's no wonder reports suggest some NFL owners were livid, complaining this opened the door for players disrupting the league's media consistency. Translation: they're losing their monopoly on the message. To Sanders and Deion Sr., that monopoly was always the problem. Deion famously built a brand as prime time because he could speak for himself, market himself, and control his identity. Now, his son is doing the same, but legally locked into an NFL contract. It's father-son brand strategy at the highest level. And here's the scary truth. The money from the prime equity clause was massive. But the narrative power from this media clause, that might be even scarier to NFL executives. Because power breeds change, and change in the NFL usually doesn't come until someone forces it. Sanders just did. If Shedeur Sanders' contract was a revolution on paper, the response from NFL ownership turned it into all-out war. Because for decades, owners have rested comfortably on one ironclad truth. They control the money, they control the media, and players, no matter how flashy, eventually play by their rules. But Sanders' deal poked holes in both pillars, and NFL owners reacted the way billionaires always react when their monopoly feels threatened, with fury. In closed-door meetings, league insiders reportedly described the equity clause as a cancer that needs to be cut out before it spreads. Those words hint at the paranoia bubbling under the surface. It's not just that Sanders is making more than a typical fifth-rounder. It's that every agent in the league now has a precedent to point to. If Shedeur could negotiate this as pick 144, what would a first-round quarterback demand with far more leverage? Owners fear a domino effect. Imagine Trevor Lawrence arriving in 2021, demanding a cut of Jaguars jersey sales. Imagine Joe Burrow linking his contract to Bengals merch revenue. The numbers climb into astronomical territory, and suddenly, owners aren't just paying salaries, they're splitting profits. But as loud as the financial anger is, there's another layer. The fear of control slipping. Sanders' retention of his personal media rights, allowing his family's cameras behind the scenes, makes ownership feel exposed. Their carefully curated, top-down messaging strategy now has a rogue partner in the room. And in the eyes of corporate billionaires, loss of narrative control can snowball into loss of league control. That's why whispers of collusion sparked even louder once details of Sanders' draft day slide came out. Think about it. Here's a quarterback projected as a top 10 or even top 5 pick. He posts elite numbers at Colorado. Over 4,100 yards, a 72.3% completion rate, 37 touchdowns, 10 picks. He enters the draft with a famous last name, national buzz, and endorsement deals already in place. By every normal metric, Shedeur should have been gone before the first commercial break on draft night. Instead, he plummeted to the 5th round. That's not just unlucky, it raised eyebrows. Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson claimed on his radio show that he had a very good source, saying league higher-ups didn't want Sanders drafted early. The idea, he alleged, was to make an example of him for walking into pre-draft meetings like a businessman instead of a desperate job applicant. Other analysts piled on, pointing to anonymous reports of owners exchanging messages about not touching Sanders after he demanded unusual clauses during interviews. Even Stephen A. Smith threw gas on the fire, openly comparing the whispers to the kind of coordinated resistance seen in Colin Kaepernick's case. And then came the lawsuit. In May 2025, a Colorado Buffaloes fan, not even Sanders himself, but a fan, filed a $100 million federal lawsuit against the NFL. His claims? That the league colluded to force Sanders down to the 5th round, violating antitrust law, civil rights law, and causing emotional distress for fans and players. Legal scholars called it a long shot, even frivolous. But here's the thing, it demanded discovery. Internal texts, emails, scouting reports, arbitration records. Suddenly, the specter of the league's private conversations going public hung in the air like a thundercloud. Even if the case fizzles, the mere filing raised the stakes. For Cleveland, this chaos was almost accidental. All they did was draft the kid. But by agreeing to his unprecedented clauses, equity and media rights, they effectively invited the NFL's old guard to turn Berea into ground zero for a contract revolution. Sources inside other front offices whispered resentment at the Browns for opening Pandora's box. Jimmy Haslam, already one of the more controversial owners in the league, has reportedly walked a tightrope between defending the pick and privately distancing himself from Deion's heavy involvement. In the hyper-political NFL climate, even that mixed messaging looks like weakness. The bottom line? The lawsuits and backlash aren't just about Sanders negotiating clever language. They're about fear. Fear that the NFL's old structures won't hold. Fear that rookie leverage is evolving faster than their legal guardrails. And most of all, fear that the balance of power, which has always tipped toward billionaire owners, just shifted toward the players, one 5th-round contract at a time. And yet, the lawsuits aren't the whole controversy, because the very question of why Shedeur fell to round 5 has sparked even darker claims. Was it just football concerns? Or was there really a coordinated sabotage against the Sanders family? Every NFL draft has surprises, but Shedeur Sanders' draft night collapse wasn't just surprising. It was historic, confusing, and downright suspicious. Just months before, he'd been positioned as a potential top 10 selection. Some mock drafts had him going as high as 1st overall to a quarterback-hungry Miami Dolphins or 2nd to Las Vegas. His numbers at Colorado gave scouts plenty to chew on. Over 4,100 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, and a jaw-dropping 72% completion rate in his final season. Add in a famous last name and a cultural presence far larger than your average college QB, and Sanders looked like one of the safest bets in the class. And then the slide started. By the end of the first round, his name hadn't been called. By the second, fans were asking what was wrong. By the third, confusion turned to disbelief. Finally, with pick 144 in the fifth round, Cleveland grabbed him. The very same player whose highlights looked like a Heisman campaign reel had tumbled down the board like a rock tossed into a pond. So what happened? If you ask scouts who were willing to go on the record, you'll hear a handful of familiar football concerns. Analysts mentioned holding the ball too long, pointing out the 52 sacks he took in his 2023 college season. Others nitpicked at his deep ball consistency, saying he'd sometimes underthrow vertical routes. A few flagged his tendency to overtrust his athleticism instead of making quicker progressions, issues that, to be fair, a lot of college quarterbacks carry into the league. But those critiques alone hardly explain a drop of over 130 picks. Quarterbacks with worse flaws than Sanders have gone in round one. So the louder whispers turned to intangibles. Reports surfaced that Shedeur's combine interviews rubbed some executives the wrong way. Multiple front offices reportedly thought he came across as arrogant or too confident, with one anonymous GM complaining he spoke like a franchise CEO instead of a prospect fighting for a job. Normally, confidence is applauded in quarterbacks. But paired with the Sanders family brand, it became polarizing. Deion Sanders, NFL Hall of Famer, Coach Prime, media empire in human form, wasn't backing down. He openly suggested Shedeur wouldn't play for every team, especially cold-weather franchises. Rumors swirled that Deion was demanding input into staff decisions or scheme fits. The optics didn't help. Teams feared they weren't just drafting a quarterback, they were drafting the entire Sanders entourage, drama and all. And then there were the contract demands. Even before draft night, word leaked that Shedeur wanted equity provisions and media control, things no rookie had ever asked for. To some executives, that was bold. To others, it was a red flag. He's acting like Tom Brady before he's even played a snap, grumbled one scout off the record. In short, Sanders didn't fit neatly into the NFL's usual mold of grateful rookie who says yes sir. Which brings us to the darkest explanation: collusion. Hall of Fame running back Eric Dickerson said outright that a source told him the NFL wanted to make an example of Sanders during the draft. His account claimed owners felt Sanders, with his NIL clout, family circus, and unprecedented contract asks, would set a dangerous precedent if rewarded with a high draft slot. So, according to the rumor, they quietly circulated word among teams to let him fall. Stephen A. Smith doubled down, alleging private texts between owners effectively blackballed Shedeur from going on day one. Did every front office buy into the sabotage? That's harder to say. Not everyone believes in an outright conspiracy. Some league insiders, like Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, argue the slide had more mundane roots: shaky interviews, scheme fit doubts, lingering questions about whether Coach Prime would be too much of a sideshow in the building. But here's the thing. Even if there wasn't a centrally coordinated plan, the atmosphere itself may have worked like soft collusion. Owners didn't need a formal huddle in a smoke-filled back room. They only needed to share the same fear, that giving Sanders what he wanted, money, media control, and a top draft slot, would open a Pandora's box for future rookies. And by draft night, that shared fear was enough to let his name slide past them all. The cost to Sanders on paper? About $44 million. If taken first or second overall, his rookie package would have landed near $48 million. Instead, his fifth-round deal clocked in at just $4.65 million. A financial crater on day one of his career. And yet, here's the irony, that freefall may have been the very opening that allowed Cleveland to bend enough to accept his contract innovations. Would the Dolphins or Raiders really have agreed to let a rookie own equity and media rights as a top 5 pick? doubtful. Falling to round 5 gave Sanders just enough leverage, with just enough desperation in Cleveland to rewire the entire rookie contract system. So yes, his tumble was brutal. Yes, it cost him millions up front. But in the most unlikely twist, the very slide that looked like sabotage has already turned into the foundation of something more historic. A contract revolution that could shake the NFL for years to come. When people heard whispers that Shedeur Sanders might have been intentionally pushed down the draft board, the conversation immediately turned to one word at the NFL dreads: collusion. It's a loaded word because the league's history makes it impossible to dismiss outright. We've seen it before. And the comparisons came quickly. The first and loudest parallel was to Colin Kaepernick. After his kneeling protests in 2016, no team would touch him. Despite his Super Bowl resume and clear ability to play at the pro level, Kaepernick's lawsuit alleged coordinated blackballing by owners, and it didn't just fizzle. It settled for millions after Discovery unearthed enough evidence to make the league nervous. That settlement proved the NFL was capable of systematic resistance when a player's presence represented more than football. Then came Lamar Jackson's free agency saga in 2023. Despite being a unanimous MVP and one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the league, teams across the NFL mysteriously balked at even meeting with him once he demanded a fully guaranteed deal. Owners argued injury concerns and fit, but analysts immediately raised eyebrows. How could a player of Lamar's caliber get so little interest? Some suspected it was coordinated resistance, not against Lamar as a player, but against the precedent his contract demands might set. Sound familiar? Now zoom back to Shedeur's slide. The whispers weren't just about his mechanics or his sack totals at Colorado. They focused on his demeanor. Too confident, too polished, acting like a CEO during pre-draft interviews. Arrogant, some executives sneered. But ask yourself, when has confidence ever been considered a fatal flaw for a quarterback? NFL teams drool over alpha personalities, the cocky field generals who command the huddle. Yet when that confidence comes packaged in the son of Deion Sanders, a young black quarterback raised in a media spotlight who dared to talk like a businessman negotiating terms, suddenly it's arrogance. Suddenly it's entitlement. And this is where the race factor enters the conversation. For decades, black quarterbacks have faced disproportionate scrutiny for traits like swagger, leadership style, or family involvement. Doug Williams, Warren Moon, Donovan McNabb, Cam Newton, all were dissected more harshly than many of their white counterparts. Even Kyler Murray's infamous homework clause felt like a dog whistle critique of commitment and work ethic. So when Shedeur gets punished for behaving like a high-leverage negotiator, critics don't see that as coincidence. They see it as part of a pattern. Stephen A. Smith took it a step further on air, comparing Shedeur's situation directly to Kaepernick's. This feels like another example of owners circling wagons to say, "Don't come in here thinking you're bigger than the league." He even suggested texts and communications were shared among owners, echoing the collusion allegations we've heard before. Not everyone buys it, of course. NFL insiders like Albert Breer pushed back, insisting it wasn't conspiracy, but simply a mess of factors. Awkward interviews, Deion's outsized personality overshadowing his son, and pre-draft arrogance that scared conservative front offices. In that version of the story, Shedeur's fall wasn't systemic racism. It was just an unlucky case of perception. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the middle. Did the league secretly meet in a smoky back room to blacklist Sanders? Probably not. But did a shared unease about his unprecedented demands, his confidence, and the family brand create a silent consensus to let him slide? That's harder to deny. Whether spoken or unspoken, that kind of collective hesitation starts to look like soft collusion. And the racial angle makes it even more combustible. It's not just he had red flags. It's the long-running narrative. Too confident, too controlling, too unconventional when compared to how the NFL likes its rookies. Quiet, obedient, grateful. Historically, it's black quarterbacks who bear the brunt of being labeled that way. What complicates the story even more is the irony. By sliding to the 5th round, Sanders actually gained leverage he might never have had as a top 10 pick. Cleveland, desperate for hope and irrelevant in NFL economics, took the risk and gave him the clauses. And now, those very clauses, equity, media rights, independent branding power, are his strongest legacy. What some see as sabotage may have created the door for revolution. Still, the broader concern remains. If Sanders' treatment is part of a larger pattern of resistance toward empowered, confident black quarterbacks, then the uproar isn't just about one player. It's about whether the NFL as a system is capable of evolving beyond its old fears. Because here's what's undeniable. Whether his fall was football, family, race, or collusion, Shedeur Sanders took that slide and turned it into a launch pad. And the league may never be the same again. What makes Shedeur Sanders' deal so extraordinary isn't just how it shook the NFL. It's how it fits into a much bigger story in sports history. Because while the league treats his contract like a weaponized virus that needs containing, athletes in other sports have been building similar models for decades. The difference is simple. Sanders is the first rookie NFL quarterback to bring those ideas in through the front door. Think back to 1984. A rookie named Michael Jordan signed his first shoe deal with Nike. At the time, endorsement contracts were straightforward. You got paid a lump sum, maybe bonuses, and the company controlled the brand. But Jordan's deal included something different: royalties. Every Air Jordan sold earned him a percentage. That one tweak turned Nike into a global sneaker empire and Jordan into a billionaire. What Sanders just did with the prime equity clause is in many ways football's Air Jordan moment. Jump forward to European soccer. Cristiano Ronaldo's Real Madrid contract wasn't just about his wages. It included image rights, a portion of revenue from advertisements, jersey sales, and appearances tied to his likeness. For years, Ronaldo's image rights reportedly earned him upwards of 20 million euros annually, money separate from his salary. Similar structures exist for Messi, Beckham, and other icons. In fact, for international superstars, it's normal. The brand is as valuable as the on-field ability. But here's where Shedeur's move stands apart. He did it not as a global icon halfway through a record-breaking career, but as a 5th-round rookie before his first NFL snap. That's what makes league insiders so rattled. He skipped the line. And the thing is, the results back him up. Within months of signing his deal with Cleveland, his rookie jersey sales blasted through 250 million across the US and international markets. Reportedly, his merchandise sales placed top 5 league-wide, ahead of players drafted much higher. What's more shocking is where those jerseys sold. Germany, the UK, even Brazil, where NFL fandom is exploding. Rough estimates suggest 15% of his social media engagement already comes from outside the US. He doesn't just have American fans. He's trending into international territory. That's exactly why global sports analysts started circling his name. They see a rookie not limited by the NFL's rigid structure, but poised as a globalized brand entity. Something much more common in soccer, basketball, even Formula One than in pro football. For the NFL, that's scary. For the rest of the sports world, it's a blueprint. Because if the NFL, the most corporate, tightly regulated, top-down sports league in America, cracks under the weight of brand equity demands, it opens the door everywhere else. Imagine if NBA rookies start asking for percentage-based sponsorship guarantees. Imagine if rising MLB stars push for revenue splits tied to jersey sales like Jordan and Sanders. Imagine if college athletes, freshly transitioned from NIL deals, march straight to pro contracts demanding similar clauses. Shedeur's situation also highlights how the NFL, unlike other leagues, has historically been conservative in protecting player individuality. NBA players design signature shoes, launch podcasts, start production companies. Soccer players strike direct ad campaigns with brands from Adidas to Pepsi. But the NFL has long steered rookies into anonymity, reminding them they're team, not individual. Sanders shattered that model the second he wrote media independence into his deal. For fans, especially Gen Z and younger, this feels completely natural. They're used to following athletes directly on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. They want authenticity over curated NFL promos. For them, Sanders' media rights clause feels like overdue modernization. But to NFL traditionalists, it's chaos. A rookie quarterback keeping his own cameras rolling in practice, running his brand alongside the team's. That's taboo turned into reality. And that's the historical through line. Players with vision forcing leagues to evolve. Jordan forced Nike to change how brands tie athletes to products. Ronaldo forced soccer clubs to rethink how image rights impact contracts when global stars outgrow even the team jersey. Sanders, he may be forcing the NFL to finally admit that their jersey sales, their content, their fan engagement don't exist in a vacuum. They exist because of players. And if players drive billions in value, they'll eventually demand billions back. That message is why Sanders' clauses send shivers through league boardrooms. Because the history of sports is clear. When players grab control of brand equity, the money scales upward forever. There's no putting it back in the box. The only question left for the NFL is whether they'll try to stamp this out or accept that Shedeur Sanders just launched football's Jordan moment. For decades, the NFL's collective bargaining agreement has been the shield owners wield to keep contracts predictable, safe, and, most importantly, under their control. Salary slotting for rookies? Locked. Limits on guarantees? Locked. Media usage? Locked. It's the perfect fortress for billionaires who like knowing exactly how much of the pie they'll keep. But thanks to Shedeur Sanders, that fortress might have its first crack in years. And the tremors from that crack could turn the 2026 CBA negotiations into a battlefield. Because here's the reality. Sanders' prime equity clause and media rights carve-outs show there are loopholes in the NFL's labor structure. He didn't break the rules, he used them. By writing his percentage commission as business income and his digital autonomy as media ownership, Sanders and his camp effectively sidestepped the rookie wage scale and salary cap restrictions without technically violating the CBA. That's both brilliant and terrifying. Why terrifying? Because precedent is the most contagious disease in sports business. The moment one player gets something, every agent in the league starts circling it like sharks. Sanders wasn't even a first-round pick. If he pulled it off at 144th overall, imagine what agents for future top 5 picks are planning. Already, insiders report agents are bookmarking Sanders' deal, highlighting it in presentations, and preparing the line. If Shedeur got it, our guy deserves it too. 10 times bigger. That's the exact nightmare owners are preparing for in 2026. The CBA has been relatively stable since the 2011 agreement set rookie salary slots. That deal was designed to stop unproven rookies from holding teams hostage with giant contracts. Remember Jamarcus Russell negotiating a $68 million package before ever taking an NFL snap? Sanders' fall to the 5th round looked like exactly the kind of scenario the 2011 deal was built to prevent from ever benefiting a player past their draft slot. Yet here we are, a 5th rounder poised to earn more from commissions and media control than multiple first-round quarterbacks combined. Owners are panicking. According to reports from league insiders, some want the new CBA to explicitly ban equity clauses. Others want to cap NIL-style earnings linked to team merchandise. A few have even floated the idea of forcing all revenue-sharing arrangements to funnel through the league first, before players receive a cut, effectively re-centralizing the control Sanders just yanked from them. But here's the catch. They can't put this genie back in the bottle without a fight, because Sanders' move isn't just popular with fans, it's wildly popular with other players. For once, a rookie isn't being scolded for being ungrateful. He's being celebrated as a pioneer, and the NFL Players Association has taken notice. In fact, some insiders say the NFLPA is already considering whether to push for expanded equity language in the next CBA, positioning Sanders as the proof of concept for how players can modernize their contracts. This sets up a collision course. Owners want to tighten the walls. Players want to push them down. And both sides know the landmark negotiations are less than 3 years away. The way this plays out could redefine not only rookie deals, but veteran contracts too. Imagine Justin Jefferson demanding jersey sales equity. Imagine Patrick Mahomes pushing for personal TikTok rights as part of his next extension. A niche rookie clause suddenly becomes the new standard for NFL superstars. And don't think for a second other leagues aren't watching. The NBA has already leaned into player-centric branding. If NFL players win broader concessions, expect NBA rookies to ask for direct equity shares tied to digital revenue streams. MLB and MLS agents are monitoring too. Even global soccer clubs are sniffing around the structure, curious how Sanders leveraged NIL continuity from college into professional terms. That shows how high the stakes are, because Sanders didn't just negotiate a good rookie deal. He opened Pandora's box of athlete empowerment. He proved that the NIL era, once thought limited to college kids cashing sponsorship checks, doesn't magically stop at the draft. It can follow players into the most corporate league in America. So when owners stare at their spreadsheets, they see the nightmare. A future where rookies stop being cheap assets and start being partners, where they can't unilaterally dictate media, where jersey sales no longer fatten only the team's wallet, where the CBA tilts momentum toward the players, one clause at a time. For years, the NFL has prided itself on being the strictest league in American sports. Shedeur Sanders may have just made them the next league to face a reckoning. And as the countdown to 2026 ticks down, an uncomfortable truth hangs over every owner's meeting. You can only bully players for so long before someone finds the loophole. And Sanders didn't just find it. He sprinted straight through it. When Shedeur Sanders walked across that draft stage as the 144th overall pick, critics called it a slide. Analysts branded it a setback. Owners smirked like they'd humbled another too-confident rookie. But only a few months later, that slide has turned into the single greatest curveball the NFL has seen in decades. Because instead of being another late-round footnote, Sanders is standing at the center of a storm, powerful enough to shake the very foundations of the sport. Think about it. A so-called fifth-round gamble has already negotiated a contract that redefines player power. He didn't just grab a little more cash or push for a bigger bonus. He forced his way into equity. He locked in media rights. He leveraged his brand, not just as an athlete, but as an enterprise. And before his first NFL snap even hit the highlight reels, Sanders' jersey sales made him richer than most of his rookie peers combined. The numbers don't lie. $250 million in merch, $14 million in commissions, and a brand footprint stretching from Cleveland to Brazil. In doing so, Sanders pulled back the curtain on a truth that owners have buried for decades. The NFL runs on player identity. Teams can push slogans, logos, and mascots all they want, but fans don't buy jerseys with paw prints or stripes on the back. They buy names. They buy stories. They buy players. And for the first time, a player is demanding and receiving his rightful share of that pie. No wonder billionaires hate it. In backroom meetings, whispers describe his deal as a virus that must be stamped out before it spreads. Lawsuits and collusion allegations chase his rise, from an angry fan suing the league for $100 million to owners being accused of conspiring to let him slide on draft night. And the paranoia isn't just about money, it's about control. Sanders ripped away control of his narrative, giving his brother media rights, vlogging his own story, reshaping how fans see his journey. That move strikes at the NFL's most treasured currency, the ability to tell, spin, and sell its version of the truth without interference. It's bigger than Cleveland, bigger than one rookie. With the 2026 CBA negotiations barreling toward the league like a blitzing linebacker, Sanders' contract looms like a live grenade on the owner's desk. Agents are studying every line of it. The NFLPA is quietly salivating over the precedent. What happens when the next Trevor Lawrence or Caleb Williams demands a 10% merch cut? What happens when established megastars, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Jefferson, Micah Parsons, point to Sanders' success and say, "We want that too"? Owners can try. History rarely moves backward. Jordan's Nike deal looked radical in 1984. Ronaldo's image rights scared soccer execs 20 years ago. Today, they're blueprints. Shedeur Sanders might have just written the NFL's version of that same playbook, whether they like it or not. Of course, the ironies are impossible to ignore. If not for the slide, if not for those whispers that pushed him to the 5th round, Cleveland might never have been desperate enough to give him the leverage in the first place. What was painted as a humiliation could go down as the luckiest fall in draft history. The kind of loss that set him up to change everything. So what is Sanders now? To some, he's still a gamble, a system quarterback with too much swagger. To others, he's a symbol, proof that new age players can't be caged by old age structures. To NFL owners, he's a threat, a face of a future where their grip on money and power loosens each time a rookie pulls out the rulebook and finds a loophole. But here's the one thing nobody denies. Shedeur Sanders has already made history without even needing game film. What happens next, whether he flames out on the field or thrives as a quarterback, almost doesn't matter. Because off the field, he's already flipped the board. This isn't just the story of a rookie quarterback. It's the story of what happens when the script gets stolen from the league office and handed back to the players. And as the 2026 CBA fight looms, every whisper, every complaint, and every nervous owner's meeting starts with the same uncomfortable name. Not Mahomes, not Brady, not Manning. Sanders, the rookie who bent the league.